162A, we're going to start, of course, with Madeline. And Madeline, the very first wine.
The very first wine, wine number one, I promise I won't tiptoe through the tulips, but I like to take just a little bit more time with it so that we can get our sea legs in terms of tasting methodology. I hope 2025 is terrific for everyone. Just to be auspicious and delicious, I have carnations from the grocery store because they cheer me up. They're not from any garden. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, if there's some of you out there, we put up questions just to kickstart your mind. You know, often growing up in the industry, I would have especially consumers ask me, what am I looking for? What do you taste? What do you smell? So here are some things to consider. The first one I just flat out stole from Tim. He says it all the time and I love it. What are the most compelling non-fruit or earth components in this wine? Because not to say that fruit is unimportant, but in this particular wine, consider non-fruit and earth specifically. How would you define the acidity? So I like to say we both qualify and quantify. So we do the whole medium plus high thing. But we also want to say, you know, how does it feel, right? To be on your own? No, I'm sorry. I'm doing a past Tippy song thing. But is it, is it cleansing? Is it austere? Is it, refreshing but round, etc.? And finally, does the wine clearly speak either to Europe or elsewhere? And I am village elder, and I don't mind saying in front of God and everybody, old world and new world, I don't find that any sort of political issue. So wine number one, picking it up, and we assess color by looking at against a white surface. And all of a sudden, it's not just white. This is a really true yellow, actually. And it's got some subtle green glints to it, which telegraphs youth. That's generally what green tells us. It moves in the glass quickly, it sheets quickly, speaking to, but not in a rush, speaking to maybe moderate alcohol levels and extract. And we shall see how that figures on the palate. Aromatically, it's so pretty. The first waft I get, and I am of the, we all approach wines differently. I tend to perceive and define what comes in front of me. I move it out of the way, and then the next thing that comes in front of me, I define and move it to the side. So the first thing that I get aromatically is this gentle, pretty waft of flowers. Really citrus blossoms, perfect citrus blossoms, like we just picked them or squashed them in your hands. I'm greedy, so I like to do that. And then on the heels of that, some actual citrus, both ripe, lime and lemon, but lime dominates, and some a little bit of zest or lime oil as well. If I move to tree fruit, it's definitely green apple or unripe pear. Not so much pear, because let's face it, pear, especially unripe or underripe, is a very subtle smell, if any. And then I get a little bit of a tickle of peach, apricot, stone fruit. It's very pretty. Tart, tropical, maybe some pineapple and passion fruit. I'm reaching a little bit. I want to see if that incarnates on the palate, but what's underlying everything, particularly the florality and the lime, ripe fruit and zest, is inorganic earth. And I'm going to define it as very clear, if you want to call it whetstone, but to me it's, rocky, flinty, slaty, almost salty. I'm not reaching for it. I think I'm going to take it on my palate. It's very interesting because it's poignant nose, but it's rich as well. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen on the palate. I was inspired to swallow a little right away because the attack is delicious. And actually, the flavor is explosive. A teeny little disconnect. And it could be just my glass at this moment. Mine is slightly under chilled, and sometimes that pulls the aromatics back a little bit. But boy, there's nothing shy about the flavors in this wine. First of all, the acidity is compelling, high, in a very attractive way. It doesn't shut down the flavor, but it is, cleansing plus plus. The rocky minerality immediately surges right on the heels of the acidity. I'm going to, and this is a personal little trick of mine, especially when I taste a wine that has a strong structural element, I go back to it almost immediately so I can let my palate get used to the acid in this particular case, and the other components will surge forward. So there's the lime and lemon, ripe and zesty. There's the green apple. There's definitely a presence of pineapple and passion fruit in this. There's no residual sugar whatsoever. But if you hold the wine mid-palate, that's another personal trick of mine, you get a plumb line of flavor, ripe and tart tropical fruit. Stone fruit's still there lurking. There's a peach, apricot, but more, maybe a little dried, not even so much fresh, but it's like chewing on flowers. Lemon blossoms, lime blossoms, apple blossoms, and kind of reflecting that, maybe a little lemongrass and sorrel. Inorganic earth, incredibly strong, super mouth-watering, long, complex. The flavors are actually swelling. And what occurs to me is that this wine is age-worthy. I would love to have like at least 6 bottles of it and open one a year to see how it adjusts itself. Right now, it's primal. Floral, citrus, acid, inorganic earth, cha-ching. I think we can move to the part of our delightful get-together where we really hope that you participate with enthusiasm, because the poll is, to remind everybody, drum roll, anonymous. And it really helps a lot. And if you don't think it's Riesling, Chenin, or Viognier, say other and then chat about what you think it might be. Riesling and Chenin, acidity-wise are right on top of each other. Flavor-wise, it depends where they're grown. Also, alcohol-wise, it depends where they're grown and if it's an expression with residual sugar or not. Both of them can display botrytis, though I don't think there's any evidence of that in this wine. Viognier, or a Viognier blend, it might, have dance partners like Marsanne and Roussanne, depending again on where it's grown, tends to run medium plus acidity, absolutely a strong floral component, usually a little bit higher in alcohol, and does an expressive job both in the Northern Rhone and, elsewhere, particularly in California, though some people have the tendency to throw oak on it, which annoys me. So Europe, we're talking Austria and France for what? Riesling for sure in Austria, Viognier and Chenin, and Riesling in France. If it were French Riesling, it would be Alsace. Not Europe, Australia, absolutely good for Riesling for sure. There's Viognier there, but I don't, other than the fantastic Louisa Rose, what's the name of the producer? I always space it out. Tim? Puseyville. Wonderful Viognier. And then California. So,
but we're almost there. We're just at 94%, and I'm going to close it in 5 seconds, but I have a dumb question of the day.
I love dumb questions. There are none.
I'm going to close the poll, and as we travel, I will ask my dumb question. I'll share the results. Here's what you've got, Madeline. You've got 44% on Chenin, 31% on Viognier, and 25% on Riesling.
A pretty even blend. And actually, in terms of Europe and elsewhere, a strong expression for France, which must be voting for both. Well, it could be voting for all 3 of them. So the one thing I will, jump in on this is, why Riesling versus Chenin or vice versa. And, I already talked about Viognier quite a bit. I think the presence of Viognier structurally is not going to have as poignant acidity. Riesling and Chenin Riesling, ask yourself, first of all, is there a petrol element in this? It doesn't have to have it. There are some areas where petrol does not surface, but I think the flavor expression of Chenin tends to be more dominant peach apricot, and Riesling tends to be more dominant green apple and strong floral. So hold that thought.
So I'm going to go to the next slide, and as it's traveling, I'm just going to ask a quick question. I feel that there's a little bit more fullness to it than just acidity. And if it's, is it wood? What is it if it's not?
I think it's
wood?
lees contact. You know, I think there's a strong lees contact component in this. And actually, when we talk about this producer, they figure that figure is big time into their winemaking. But you know, I don't think it's obvious as in non-aromatic varieties like Chardonnay and Pinot Gris, but it's in there. I didn't think this was aromatic enough for Riesling, though it could be my nose. But remember what I said, in my glass, this wine has a beautiful but gentle aroma, but it's explosive on the palate. It could be simply how this is showing. We are indeed in Austria. And I've got to tell you, Austrian Riesling is my idea of a spectacular time. It's only 2% of what Austria produces. Are we back in Evan's
Don't worry.
house in San Francisco? But we are actually in the Comtal, which is you know, along the Danube, but it is east of Kremstal and the Wachau. This is from Langenloy, or, you know, I would say Langenlois, but I've been counseled to perhaps not pronounce the S. If anyone's fluent in German, speak up in the chat room. This is sort of the historic center of the Comtal, which is a river, right, that moves northwards from the Danube. And there are gentle hills that then go up into the Alps. So there's both valley floor and hillside. This producer, Hiedler, is a true leader by anybody's measure, you know, sustainable, organic, etc. And they grow, you know, dominantly Gruner Veltliner, but a significant amount, 25 of their production is indeed Riesling. And I tell you, I am personally responsible for getting a little troop of us possibly going to Austria in April, just because the smell and flavor of Austrian Riesling knocks me out. What to tell you about Hiedler? This is family owned and operated. 2 sons now, 5th generation. And you know, they go back to the mid 1800s with a family that were originally leather makers from tanning. What's interesting about their particular methodology is extended lees contact and batonnage. Wow, is this beautiful or what? And notably, malolactic is not blocked, but allowed to occur naturally. So it's possible, probable. That's one of the things that you know, correctly perceived as a richness on the palate. The terroir in this area, the Comtal overall, is incredibly complex. You know, we always hear about, how do we pronounce it? Loess, L-O-E-S-S, the wind-blown silt, but that tends to figure more in the plains, higher altitude. And I think their highest vineyard is at least 300 meters above sea level. So it's significant. How are they attractive? A ginger and a dark brother. But we've got calcareous clay, we've got loess, we've got quartz, we've got volcanic soils, we've got schist, you name it. What really fascinates me when I read about Austrian macro and microclimate is you've got 2 massive influences. You've got, you know, cold air coming from the Alps in the north, and then you've got significantly warm air coming in from the east, from Hungary, the Pannonian plain, which is neat. We've got, you know, diurnal swings here for sure. But I think you know, what we're seeing here is a beautiful expression of Riesling. Those of you that are having a panic attack, how are you going to tell the difference between Austrian Riesling, you know, Trocken, German Riesling, Australian Riesling, etc.? I think we're not quite there in showing Austrian in exams, though don't quote me, especially not on social media. But what we have is the florality and the citrus and the poignant acidity and a richness. That's a gorgeous example. And thank you so much for selecting this, Evan. I hope I did it justice. I truly love this wine.
So a couple of questions. So officially, is this off dry from Stacey Davis?
It is not off dry. It is bone dry.
Okay.
And then there's an illusion of sweetness because Riesling brings that to the table mid-palate. Tim and Evan, would you agree with me on that? I perceive absolutely Zippo RS in this wine.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts about that. You mentioned one of them. Another one is the whole concept of dry extract, where you're working with really low yields from probably an older vineyard. So you've got a lot of particulate matter in solution, right? You got a lot of stuff that if you don't filter it out, you've got a really rich wine without the alcohol. And then, as Maddie pointed out, more often than not, the Austrians put the Rieslings through malolactic. Not everybody does that, right?
Right.
So the acidity is still there. And then for the question about, residual sugar, always pay attention to the finish of the wine, because that's the true measure of wine sweetness or dryness. But this wine has a really rich mid palate. And also looking at the color, you wouldn't think it was 2 years old, but the combination of least contact and also malolactic.
It's opened it up.
Yeah, and ripe grapes, Yeah.
And this comes from actually multiple terrace vineyards on both sides of the river. This is the least expensive Riesling they make, which I think is a great ambassador for the other stuff.
Yeah. So Stacey, just looking at your thing, I would just say taste a wine with residual sugar against something like this, and it'll be pretty noticeable. But again, you gauge a wine sweetness, dryness by the finish more than anything.
And I think, Tim, you answered aptly Ivan's question on Viognier. So I'll leave it there in the chat. And I want to just, as we move on to the next wine for Evan, Bob Power, thank you very much. The process has been refined, MTW's bottling process, over the course of almost 5 years here. And so, yes, we are able to get, if anything, I feel like there's even a little bit of prickle that's left in the 187, which is really exciting whenever I see that.
Parting shot, if you want something really entertaining, go to the Heidler website and read about their philosophy, because they have a positively poetic, the two young brothers, expression of what they think minerality is. So go for it. I'm not going to spoil it. No spoiler alert here, except that it exists. Thank you. That was gorgeous wine.
Wine number 2, guys.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome, Madeline. And I think we were chatting offline earlier. Yeah, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have a book like Tim. You should think about starting your own podcast, like What's in My Glass with Madeline, something like that. You do such an eloquent, articulate job each and every time. I'm always happy to be batting second after you. You always get on base.
Baseball, right?
Baseball, right. Pitchers and catchers report very soon. So anyway, I really enjoyed doing that. And yeah, you guys nailed the wine. And Tim, thanks for do all the ads too. And it is a very distinctive style, and particularly when you mitigate ML in other Rieslings versus this one, it's going to be refined. And then clearly people who batonage their wines a lot, you're going to get a wine that has almost more of the texture of that Viognier in a package that clearly, at least to me, speaks Riesling. So let's move on to wine number 2. And again, I think just a couple of things to consider here. Depth of color could tell you about climate. It could tell you about winemaking techniques. And of course, as Madeline pointed out a little bit earlier, it can tell you about age as well, too, as white wines clearly darken. But there are lots of different things that give color. And warmer climates, thicker skins, deeper pigmentation, skin contact will give you pigmentation. Aging in oak barrels can give you pigmentation too. So just think about that. But usually, and Madeline nailed it, it's usually age that's going to give that away to you. Second thing, are there any other non-fruit things that are here, or is this a fruit bomb? Something to think about. And then the structural levels are oftentimes the architecture is going to give you as much information when you're studying about a wine as the flavors and aromas and stuff like that. So sometimes it's good to actually work backwards. That's a technique, something that I teach with people who are examining, where we always go front to back, sometimes go back to front. It's kind of like if you go to the gym and all you do is work out your upper body, you start to look like Popeye after a while and your core is thin. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and look at our wine. Color-wise here, I'm having a hue that's again sort of a nice medium yellow color, probably fairly similar in color to the wine that Madeline just showed you. I'm looking at the color here, and whereas the other wine had a real sheen and almost a brilliance to it, this one is just, it's not what I would call day bright, but it's not as bright as the other wine before. Something to think about. That might be elements in solution that are actually absorbing light and not refracting back. Could speak to the winemaking technique in that particular case. Let's go right on to the most important thing, which is of course what you're getting in your nose and ultimately your palate. As those of you who know, I always talk about a few things in wine: FEW, fruit, earth, wood. Those are the things you need to talk about and will generally give you the lion's share of dialogue points in the wine. So as I smell this wine, right off the bat, I'm getting a wine that is at once a little bit more, less, it's not as quiet as Madeline's wine is, but it's not, jumping off the table with a lampshade on its head at a party either. It does have some richness to it. It does have a very clear profile of fruit. The fruit to me is divided into elements that are citric, again, sort of that lemon, but the riper side of lemon, grapefruit, but the riper side of grapefruit, but yellow, not pink in nature. A lot of tree fruit elements here. Definitely apples, pears, both green and of the brown variety. A little bit of quince, if I could throw that in there as well too. And then you get some sort of fresh stone fruit elements. I'm getting just a kiss of apricot, maybe a little bit of nectarine in there. And then tropicality, bit of mango, maybe a bit of pineapple, but definitely on the underripe side. Think about the mango and the pineapple when you go out for a Southeast Asian mango salad or something like that, and not that sort of really bright, broad, super ripe stuff that you might grill or eat in fruit cocktails or whatever. Florality here, but not as strong as Madeline's wine. But then there are other things going on. There's definitely a ginger to it, both in terms of like a ginger powder, but gingered root, almost like candied ginger. I'm getting a little bit of verbena, getting a little bit of, again, sort of a lemongrassness to it. So sort of these interesting herbal elements. And then behind that, what kind of earth am I getting? No organic minerality, or organics, I should say, but I am definitely getting a minerality to the wine, almost against sort of a stony character to it. And no wood, nothing really suggesting wood to it at all. And I'm not getting any pepperiness on it there, Kevin, but maybe some of people are. And then let's go ahead and taste it, because you can't measure the elements without putting it in your mouth. I'm getting a wine that's got medium plus acid, not as shrill or electric as the first wine had, but still quite refreshing. Medium plus alcohol, a little bit richer, a little bit fuller, a little bit denser. I think somebody mentioned that earlier, perhaps as you noticed it even as you were swirling in the wines. And then what's really different about this wine is the texture. This wine is round. This wine is smooth. This wine is creamy. I wouldn't say buttery, right? Because buttery suggests malolactic and a whole other number of things, but it definitely has a sort of smoothness to it and a beauty to that smoothness to it, kind of like a Barry White ballad, I would always say. You get that kind of, whoa, really nice thing going on there. It's long and it's delicious. So what can we say about that? So let's go ahead and take a look at what our options could be here, because there are a couple, and we'll wait for those to pop up. Choices that we've got. So Chardonnay, Riesling, and don't let it be said that Evan hasn't thrown out 2 Rieslings in a row before, so don't throw that out there. Pinot Blanc is an option, and those are the ones that I'm listing for you. All of those wines being made as single variety wines, unblended. So think about, to you, if you think this is single in nature, and if you're one of these people out there that does agree, we can agree to disagree, and in fact, that's where some of, as Madeline said earlier, the most formidable discussion points are. So if you're getting something that suggests a blend or whatever, throw it in the chat and we can talk about it later. Riesling, Madeline sort of went through the book about Riesling before. Chardonnay, texturally richer, rounder, more of a blank canvas. Clearly, where it is grown and how it is grown is going to dictate both usage, being it for still wine or sparkling wine or whatever, but also the flavor platform. So really, it's kind of a blank canvas. Everything we do is on top of that, usually layered. But the one thing most Chardonnays have is sort of a richer, fuller texture to it. And then there's our friend Pinot Blanc, which can come in many different shapes and sizes, whether you're in Alsace, whether you're in Italy, whether you're in Germany, Austria, a lot of other places, a grape of many colors. As far as our geographical associations, France could certainly be all of the above. Italy could be, well, all of the above. Australia could be all of the above, and hey, all of them could be all of the above. So I guess that gives you a
Gee,
little
thank
bit
you.
more,
Yes.
yeah, a little bit more work there. But think about those. Think about examples we've had about of these in the past and your own taste and experience, and we'll hop on our jet and we will leave
Evan,
Germany.
just
Yeah.
one quick question because I'm feeling it and I see Bill saying it. Is there phenolic bitterness in this comparing it with the first one, which really didn't have it?
I To me, phenolic bitterness is going to be actually bitter. I'm not getting so much bitterness in here. There is certainly a possibility of one of two things. It could be riper grapes, thicker skins, which are going to, by definition, even if you press quickly, give you some phenolics in the wine. It could be that they're allowing the wine to sit as must pre-fermented before the fermentation is starting, chilling a tank down a little bit to hold it. That would give you, so that sort of cold soak would give you a little bit. But if it's there, it's very subtle. It's not strong to me. So what do we got here? Well, we got the lion's share of people going in the camp of Pinot Blanc. Almost, well, 2/3 of you are doing that. Some Chardonnays, no Rieslings. Obviously, it would be a very different wine than the first one we had before. And in terms of countries, we're mostly Old World. Looks like about 2/3 in the Old World, a little bit Aussie, a little bit California. And once again, I would look at the prominence of that minerality and how it plays there and how, if it does exist in New World places, again, non-European places like Australia and California, those are going to be awfully cool climate. And the acid, I don't think, would be as soft as it were in the context of that, in a New World area. So I'm kind
I'd
of
love to
probably,
know in the chat room at some point, why Pinot Blanc over Chardonnay? Just saying.
okay, yeah, let's talk
And
about that.
and Jerry's piped up with Pinot Gris, which is definitely another, a blank canvas grape
Very
variety.
much so. Very much. A lot of them are in sort of that same sort of camp. So
Mhm.
let's go through, let's get on our plane, let's see where we end up. And that'll really open up, I think, the dialogue a bit more. So we're
Bye,
leaving our
Heedler.
by Hiedler, by Comptal, by Langenloy. And then we are going to go on our plane, but we're taking sort of like, I don't know, what's the Austrian equivalent of like Ryanair or something like that? There must be a little local thing because we're just hopping next door. So this is a short flight. I think it would probably be equally delightful and probably more fun to do on a train than it would be in the airplane because it would be beautiful to do and probably take about the same amount of time. And we're going to end up in Alsace, and we're going to end up at the very venerable house of Paul Blanc. Paul Blanc is a very celebrated producer in Alsace who, the funny thing about Alsace, everybody's old in Alsace. So he is yet another one of these producers that goes back to the 17th century. If your family started making wine in, I don't know, the early 1800s, you're a new kid on the block. That's what I figured out by looking at great houses that all seem to have started sometime in the 1600s. That's when they started. They're based in Keitzheim, which is in the so-called Haut-Rhin, which is actually, there's an Haut-Rhin, a Bas-Rhin. The Bas-Rhin is hot, it's kind of confusing, but they're in the Haut-Rhin in the town of Keitzheim. But they actually purchase fruit from lots of different areas, and they are really a great producer. They're very much at the forefront of biodynamics, sustainability, um, uh, organics, all good stuff like that. And this wine that they make at Paul Blanc is one of what they call part of their classic line. And the classic line are the non-cru wines. They make both cru and then they make grand cru, like super small cru wines where they're not blended, that are literally isolating parcels together. And this is just a selection of cru fruit because that's all they purchase from across the board. It is Pinot Blanc. Now, the thing that you need to talk about in the context of Pinot Blanc is Pinot Blanc, particularly in Alsace, more so than Italy, more so than Austria, more so than Germany, is actually a hodgepodge. Unless you know for a fact that this is 100% Pinot Blanc, which we know. Pinot Blanc is oftentimes a grape called Auxerrois, Auxerrois, which can be labeled Pinot Blanc when it's there. Some people label Auxerrois, some do Pinot Blanc, but any combination of Auxerrois, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, vinified white, and legally, all of those things together make up Pinot Blanc. So anything that's got that combination there. But when we work with Pinot Blanc here at Master of the World, and when we're teaching you, we're always going to go for pure forms. But sometimes you're going to see that. Sometimes you'll see a grape labeled as Klevner, Klevner, which is also Alsace and other parts of the world, which is also sort of Pinot Blancish too. But this is pure to do Pinot Blanc. Certified organic. comes off of a combination of soils that are gravel, sand, and limestone based on where they're at. Very slow, cool fermentations, native yeast, long 4 to 10 week fermentation. So they like to go long and slow, and they do a great job. It's only 13% alcohol on this wine, and it is Pinot Blanc, just as a reminder, is a mutation of Pinot Noir. So it's thing that it's interesting about what these guys do is they're very traditional. So this wine is unfined and unfiltered. And if you had been with me on the line when we were bottling this, it was full of gunk, which is what unfinding and unfiltering is going to do. So we actually had to stop our lines a little bit early so we wouldn't pull up any of this stuff there. And I was worried that some of it would get through. Clearly it didn't, but maybe some of the very micro pieces is what's giving you, maybe if you're perceiving a slightly hazier appearance to the wine, what's going on there. But the hallmark to me about Pinot Blanc, and again, going back to Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris has a little bit of a spicier character to it to me. Pinot Blanc has just sort of got this wonderful purebred, round, almost waxy nature of fruit. Again, that sort of tree fruit, ripe citrus fruit, etc. It doesn't have any of the spiciness that's there. Pinot Gris oftentimes does get some forms of skin contact. Pinot Blanc usually not. And Pinot Blanc is just usually going to be creamier. You get richness in Pinot Gris, but it's almost like an unctuousness. It's not necessarily a creaminess to it. Philippe and Frédéric are the multi-generations who are now overseeing the wines today, clearly not dating back to the 17th century, but perhaps 5 or 6 families ago. And I think they do just an awesome job. For me, when you're looking for benchmark Alsace Pinot Blanc, these are the folks I would go to probably first. I would also tell you not to steal Heidler's thunder. Go to their website. Their website is absolutely amazing too. Not only are they very, because remember, depending on what year you're in, Alsace could be Germany, Germany could be Alsace, etc. It's very precise, extremely precision, but they focus in on wonderful distilled information on the individual crus, the Grand Crus, where they're purchasing from, and they also showcase so-called alternative grape varieties. So you can, from their, you can get a 100% Auxerrois. You can get a 100%
You can come to Michigan and get 100% Auxerrois.
There you can.
We grow it here.
You know, they do dry Muscat, they do everything. So it's a really cool house. And once again, I think a really lovely example of a dry Alsace styled.
Evan, if I can tag team, I just want to say the mouthfeel on this wine is so beautiful. You know, it doesn't need food. It's got a roundness, a lustriousness, and a balance between the nose and the palate that's really something. You know, it reminds me, if it were to remind me of anything, not so much Pinot Gris, but a rich Mâconnais. What do you guys think? It's, you know.
Yeah, it's sharp. Well, and that's why I threw the Chardonnay on there, because I think there are elements of it that have that sort of Chardonnay-esque texture, but there's also a turned down volume. And even Chardonnays, even from the Macon, they're bolder, they're more bodied than this. The creaminess here is deceptive. And for me, I usually find that with Alsace, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris to a lesser degree as well, but spot on.
What's the price on this? This has got to be a great value for restaurants. You know, I was thinking great by the glass option, great for events.
29.
Yeah, 26 to 29, depending on where you are. But yeah, it's a delightful wine. And there you go.
There you go.
Tim.
All right.
First wine of the day.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Now for something completely different. Okay. Let's take a look at the wine first. I think you're going to see pretty quickly that this is the most deeply colored wine of the 3 white wines. We're going to call that a medium yellow plus. What else about it? It's clear. Yeah. In terms of the legs, tears, viscosity, oh goodness. Okay. So everybody take note. You know, my glass is kind of in slow motion. That means a lot. Okay. All right, let's go on to the nose. And everybody just take a second, because I want you to let all this sink in, and then we'll talk about it. And when I said something about it being different, I wasn't kidding, right? Okay. All right. The first things that occurred to me, and there are many things in rapid succession. First of all, the alcohol. Notice the alcohol level. You can connect that to the really slow legs and tears. Okay, alcohol is high. Yep. Next up, there is a sense of oxidation that's going on here throughout the wine. Okay. What else about it? There's another compound, aldehydes. Okay, so it's aldehydic. And aldehydic here, aldehydes technically, and I've never even impersonated a chemist, okay? The aldehydes, that is basically oxidized alcohol, oxidized ethanol. So there's two kinds of oxidation. You have chemical oxidation, which is everything in a wine except for alcohol. And then you have oxidized alcohol, ethanol, which is aldehydes, okay? And there is a reason for it. And I don't even want to pretend to make stuff up, okay? All right, so what is aldehydes, what do they smell like? They smell like, kind of like under roasted or green nuts, like unroasted pistachios, unroasted walnuts. What else? Peanut shells, especially if you get them that's not roasted and you see green in a peanut shell. Bruised apple, oxidative apple, bruised pear. What else? Things like that. There's a little chamomile in there too. And then in terms of the fruit, there's definitely fruit here. Most of it's oxidized. So there's the bruised apple, bruised pear. What else? There's preserved lemon, and it's kind of like lemon pith and peel preserved. And what else am I missing? Also, I would just say along the aldehydes thing, there's olive. It reminds me of green olive. I don't know how I missed that. Okay. What else? There's a certain spice to it, like ginger spice, but it's really, muted. It's in the background. The wine does have pronounced minerality, and there's a chalkiness too, that a real like chalk dust to it. There is oak here, but it's used oak and it's in the background. Okay, so I would just say what's important here is the winemaking. Yeah, because there's a lot of winemaking influence going on here. All right, everybody, taste it, please. Okay, everything carries through the palate. It's fairly powerful wine. It's pretty rich. It's close to being full body. You can feel the alcohol all the way down into here. So the alcohol is at least 15%, maybe even a little higher. The acid, curiously enough, it is, well, after the previous two wines, the acid seems like is almost medium plus, not quite. So whatever this is doesn't have a lot of acidity to it. The aldehydic oxidative stuff comes through. It's a little tartar, so there's more of the lemon on the palate, maybe even grapefruit, but they're still preserved and they're a little bit tartar and still bitter. The bruised apple, bruised pear thing. The unroasted nuts is really stronger. The aldehydic, the green olive especially. A little bit of dried lemon verbena, dried, lemony type things, almost licoricey. The minerality is really quite pronounced. It's chalky. It's the whole mid palate. And you can see the texture of the wine is rounded. I'm going to go taste it again. Go ahead, please. It's for science. Yeah.
Salty, Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to say saline. It's salty. Actually has a salty texture. Okay. What else about it? The alcohol, again, is high. The acid is medium on retasting it. There's some phenolics in it, so some skin contact maybe. The finish is long. The wine is very complex. And yeah, so this is really something. It's very distinct, obviously, in the winemaking and the character of the wine. All right, so why don't we go to the poll and see what we got?
Okay. And Tim, while I pull that up, can you take a look at the comments? Can you explain bruised? Madeline said
bruised.
Like
okay, so
leaving it out. Yeah.
Okay, so imagine you cut a piece of an apple and just leave it somewhere for
That's what I said.
2 hours. Leave it for a couple hours and still it starts to turn brown. At some point, it's even going to smell like Calvados, like apple brandy. But before it does, because literally when it gets to apple brandy, it's fermenting. Before it does, it smells bruised. It's brown. Okay. What else? Did we do all this? Yeah, I think it smells like liquor. Not quite. Yeah, it's the strong water, Kevin, is not strong enough, but you got a point there. Okay, here are your choices. You've got Muscat, which would be very floral, very aromatic. You get Palomino Fino, that speaks to a category of wine all to itself. And then you've got a Portuguese white blend, right? Which would definitely have the richness of this wine, maybe not the alcohol or the oxidative qualities. Your choices for a place of origin would be Spain, would be Portugal, or Australia, or South Africa. Okay, so everybody, you got a lot to work with there. Why don't you cast your votes? Everybody vote. Okay. This wine has a very distinctive style. We'll talk about it after the fact.
Absolutely. Two other things as people are thinking about their voting. Portuguese blend. Portuguese have got a lot of grapes there. So if you're sitting here just sort of puzzled by the flavor profile here, it is quite possibly that it could be something you just aren't familiar with, and that's okay. Portuguese do like to blend and play a lot. Most of them are not monovarietal wine.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, nobody went for the Muscat. Lots of people for the Palomino in Spain probably went to sherry. We're going to find that out. And then Portuguese blend. So let's jump on, Evan's Learjet. Let's see where we're going to go. And, for once, we don't have to cross an ocean for the second flight in a row. Yeah, we're going to, frankly, from where we were in Alsace, we can be where we're going in about probably an hour and 20 minutes. So that's great. All right. So we are headed to the Iberian Peninsula, and we're headed to Spain, and we're heading to Jerez, which is on the Atlantic coast. It's not on the Mediterranean. It is west of the Strait of Gibraltar. We're going to Sherry. And okay, there we are. We're in the Sherry Triangle. That's actually in Jerez de la Frontera. And you're in sherry country. So again, the grape is Palomino Fino, which is over 90% of what's planted in region. So yeah, this is a classic Fino sherry, right? And what else can we say? This is Emilio Hidalgo, and that's not to be confused with Bodegas Hidalgo, which is the older and more famous bodegas that produces Manzanilla, La Gitana, which is very famous. Emilio, although this winery was, it's not opened yesterday, is 1874. So currently Manuel Nieves, who is the winemaker, the Capataz, they're called, is the fifth generation of his family to run the bodega, the cellar. So I would just say, I have to be Inigo Montoya and sum up here, because I was reviewing sherry notes like that, and there's really no category of wine, no other category that is as complicated as sherry. I also think there are so many places in the wine world that you have to go to have a clue about the wine. Sherry is numero uno. You'd have to go there to really get a clue of what the wines are about, because every bodega makes a dozen to 15 different wines, and they're making all the different sherry styles, right? And with Fino is basically the youngest version of sherry. It's only fortified to 15%. You have a couple things going on. You have this layer of Saccharomyces yeast that's called flora. They don't top up the barrels, and they only fill them to about 3/4 full. And it looks like oatmeal, and it grows on the surface, and it prevents the wine. It prevents chemical oxidation that I just talked about, but it also oxidizes the alcohol. Hence why sherry smells like aldehydes and sherry. Okay. I'm a huge fan of these wines. I think this is one of the best. If I think about my favorite aperitifs, I've got 3 of them. One is anything that has to do with Campari. Number 2 is champagne. Number 3 is Fino or Manzanilla sherry, because I think they're just so versatile with food, or they're delicious by themselves. And what else?
What do you like to eat with this stuff, Tim? What is
anything
what foods
fried? Anything having to do with fried fish, ham, and also Marcona, the almonds, sardines, pot stickers, anything that's fried tastes amazing. And you think about most things you find in a tapas bar, little bits. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
No driving.
No, you got 15%, but it is impressive. I imagine all 3 of us have been to sherry. It's amazing how much of it you can drink and still feel,
Yeah.
Is it an acquired taste, Tim? I just want to address what Joel said out there.
Liming, that's a great question. I think sherry is grown-up wine. At least this style of sherry, because there's lots of different styles. My first memories of sherry are seeing ads in magazines in the 60s for Dry Sec and Harvey's Bristol Cream. Those are cream sherries. Those are sweet blended Olorosos, right? So they're pretty sweet, and they're easy to drink. This, on the other hand, and most sherry is dry. And I would say 30% of all sherry is this style. So it's either Fino or Manzanillo, which is a Fino made in a certain place, Sanlúcar de Barrameda on the coast. That's a more delicate style. Yeah, you're right. This is kind of a grown-up wine because it's dry, it's oxidative, there's nothing Hello Kitty about it, It's just that it's all savory flavors. Yeah.
And, I don't think it's part
Hello
of the
Kitty about it. That's a great line.
I don't think that it's part of the American culture in terms of the flavor and fragrance. And I'm not saying that folks who weren't touched by it are not lack sophistication. I think it's one of those that if it doesn't touch you, you sort of have to take the word for someone who's telling you, this is a great example of type. See
Yeah.
if you can make friends with it,
Yeah, I
It's,
would also add
mhm.
before the people that are out there, as I'm watching little sad faces on the screen,
I love the controversy. I love it.
before you throw out the entire category, two
Oh,
things.
well.
Number one, there are different styles. There are
Yeah.
those that are bone dry. That Tim, we just had a Fino here, the Manzanilla, which can even be, for lack of better words, drier than some Fino styles. Then you have Olorosas, you've got Palo Cortados, you've got creams, you've got all of them. So they go from sort of this really bright. I mean, there are Sauvignon Blancs, by the way, that have more alcohol than this coming out of California. But this is a very food wine. Tim got it there. I would throw on Pakoras, papadums, things like that. Again, fried type things that work really well with this. But then move down. So if you find Fino too much of an assault on your palate, maybe move down to a different style that's a little bit
or chill it
rounder,
a
a little
little
bit
more.
riper. Yeah, that
Chill.
too.
And by the way, no frownies, have a carnation.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay you don't like it, but I will also just say it's really one of the most instructive places you could go anywhere in the wine world, where you would learn more than you would learn practically anywhere else about winemaking and styles. I would also say the single greatest food and wine pairing meal I've ever had was a 15-course lunch at Lou Style. And every course different sherry,
Nice.
and it was
Palo Cortado. Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
and the dizzying range of Amontillado
Yeah.
that you can get
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So we'll call that last parting shot before you move to the fourth wine. We'll call that in defense of sherry. And that
Yeah,
will-
no, and Joel's not coming with you.
no,
Yeah, that's
clearly
okay.
not.
You know,
That's
the thing is, and I'm sure you two would agree with me, this is the least understood great classic wine in America. I mean, people have no clue what to do with it. They store it wrong, they serve it wrong at the wrong temperature with the wrong foods. Yeah. So unfortunately, this is a wine where some education is needed. All right.
I'm
Now
going
we'll
to
go
just
to
give
red wine.
one tip to those who are new, because I do see some new faces here. If you are trying to figure out when they're talking about the alcohol, how much alcohol it is, you don't have to go online to figure it out. You just got to take the sleeve off and the alcohol is right there. That's one of the legal requirements for us.
And
it's
the
actually really
importers
helpful.
on there, wildly important, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if you're going to buy sherry, one more thing about this wine: buy half bottles or buy 500 ml bottles and buy them with screw caps. Okay. Because oddly enough, this wine, once you open it, it's going to oxidize within 48 hours. Right.
Yeah.
and
You know, the
keep it
floor
in the
that protects the
refrigerator.
chemical oxidation, it does not protect the wine from oxidizing. I would say that all the other wines are going to last longer once you open it than this wine. So if you open it, you got to drink it. Okay.
Let me answer the technical question here.
Yes.
Is there a vintage? No, there's no vintage.
No.
Tim, explain why.
Okay, so Bob, short question, long answer. So no, you're not going to get a vintage Fino or practically most sherries simply because they are blends. They are blends out of a Solera system where they are blending wine that could go back literally tens of decades and with current wine. And so it's a system of fractional blending. And they take wine out of cask with Fino and Manzanilla 5 times legally a year. So they're constantly, and that flora that grows on the surface, it looks like oatmeal. It needs younger wine to stay alive. So they're constantly refreshing and taking wine out of the oldest barrels. Okay, that's a shortened version. Now we're going to go to red wines. Okay.
Version of Body Snatchers. You have to rejuvenate the.
I'd never thought of that. Okay, here we go. This is the first red wine. It's got quite a bit of depth of color, everybody. We're going to hold it up. We're going to take a look at that against the white background. I think this is a pretty deep ruby, okay? I tilt the glass forward, it lights up a little bit. I would call this a deep ruby with a lighter ruby purple pink rim. So the wine's fairly young, right? Not too much maturity evolution, okay? And there's the last slide on this. We didn't talk about these guys. There's Manuel, okay? All right, so there's my questions. I forgot to do them last time. Let's do them for this wine. So take a look at the depth of color. Does that suggest a grape variety? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Especially, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, the second question that I put in is, what are the most important non-fruit aromas and flavors? And with practically all the wines, that question is important for this wine. Number 3, how would you describe the structure of the wine as it relates to the climate? And really what I'm talking about there is the alcohol level and the ripeness of fruit, because those two go hand in hand. They really do. Okay, with that, let's smell the wine and see what we have. Okay. And the first thing I can just tell you is that, wow, there's a lot going on here. Okay. All right. First things up is that the fruit is almost like a compote. So I would say, with the exception of blue fruit, there is red fruit, dark fruit, black fruit, and kind of sultana raisinated fruit. Okay. And a lot of it is really ripe. I wouldn't say it's cooked, but it's almost to the compote level. And that is, it's like almost like a fruit cake where it's hard to, separate things out. There is red plum and black plum both. There is really ripe red cherry. That's actually Bing cherry. What else about it? Again, black plum, black cherry, blackberry, and it's all really ripe, bordering on compote. There's also, I think, a little bit of raisinated fruit here as well. And then again, a lot of fruit, but beyond the fruit, the most important thing is that second point in the three questions, and that's non-fruit, okay? You pull your nose out of the glass, it's kind of like potpourri and lavender, both, and it's fresh, and that would, connect to the color of the wine. What else about it? There's a lot of savory herbs. It's hard to separate them out. It's almost like herb de Provence. Yeah, with the lavender and thyme and things like that. There's chervil, there's basil. What else about it? There's black pepper. There's also a savory, almost soy sauce to it. Yeah, and it's funny, the lavender keeps kicking in. I see the color purple, believe it or not. What else about it? It is both earthy and minerally. Okay, so it's literally, there's brown mushrooms and there's soil, turned soil, and then there's rocks. There's a stony minerality to it. There's oak on this wine, but it's not new, expensive, small barrels. It's larger barrels. I think it's more used than new. And what else? Yeah, it's a pretty complex wine. All right, why don't you taste it, please? Wow. Okay. And although it's not the same level as the sherry before it, the alcohol here is higher. So it's at least 14.5. You can feel it. It's like vapors right here. And it's funny, with the lavender, it feels almost mentholated, right? Okay. What else about it? So I would say everything that I said on the nose just dragged forward into the palate. Okay. You've got, although the fruit tartens up a little bit, is still really ripe, almost compoted, cooked. A lot of it red. In fact, more red fruit on the palate. It tastes like straw. It's like, I describe it as rusted strawberry jam. It's like strawberry jam with iron filings in it. Okay. What else about it? It's peppery. It's very peppery on the palate, more so than on the nose. The savory herbs really come into play. The lavender, there's more lavender, the chervil, the basil, things like that. And then once you get to the mid palate, it is really quite stony and earthy at the same time. I mean, that dominates the middle of the wine. And then the wine finishes with a kind of a rounded texture of used wood, but at the same time, there's gritty tannins. And I would say this is not anything like Cabernet or Nebbiolo or anything crazy, but the tannins are surprisingly gritty on the finish. So what all that is to say, it's a really complex wine, but at the same time, it strikes me as being young, okay? And that connects to the color. What else about it? The acid's higher than I thought it would be. It's at least medium plus. I said tannins probably medium plus. The finish is long, complex. It's only going to get more complex. Really good bottle of wine. Okay, let's see what we got. Li Ming pulled up the ballot here. We've got
did. Tim, given that the first red wine always takes people a little longer, I wanted to show all the options of before.
Okay, so here we go. We got Pinot Noir. This would be kind of like the monster truck pull of Pinot Noir. Zinfandel possible, because really big, peppery. And if you put Petit Syrah in Zinfandel, which a lot of people do, not most, and if they do, it's because it's there in the vineyard, then you have some tannin on the finish. And then you've got a Grenache blend, okay? The regions are Spain, which could be Garnacha, by the way, which is where the grape is originally from. You got France for both Pinot Noir and Grenache, California for all three, and Australia also for all three. In fact, some of the oldest Grenache vineyards on the planet are in Australia. Okay, all right, so let's vote. Let's see what we got. And yeah.
Tim, that ripeness, and the alcohol on the palate almost come across like sweetness, like there's an illusion of sweetness to this wine. But I thought you described it brilliantly, and that combination of like, you know, dried herbs. And should someone ask themselves if they think it's a monovarietal or a blend? Is that a useful question?
That is an excellent question, Madeline. And can you get so much stuff in the glass from a single varietal? And the answer is not very often. Okay, here we go. Most people, okay, are going Zinfandel. Okay, so for most people, as your attorney, I would ask you to consider how earthy is Zinfandel on average. The answer is not too much. Okay, so this wine is really earthy and minerally at the same time. I mean, a lot. Okay. In fact, you know, it's funny because the finish I'm still tasting is like black pepper and rocks. Okay, that should be a cocktail. The name of cocktail. Okay, and then all right. So let's get on Evan's, you know, Learjet, and let's see where we're going. And you know, I think this is the theme of this particular flight thus far, is that we're not going very far between stops, and this is going to keep with that theme.
I'm glad, because I get claustrophobia. No small planes for me, man. You know, I'll see in commercial business class.
One time I went through one in a thunderstorm, and like it was exciting. That's all I'll tell you. All right, we're going from Jerez on the Atlantic to the Southern Rhone, and we're going to Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Oh, yeah, and just, you know, just fantastic wines. Remember, these are Grenache blends. I think now that the law says what does it allow for 18 grapes, some of them white, at least 5 of them white. This is also the very first Appellation Contrôlée granted in 1935. I've been here a couple of times. It's definitely Mediterranean. It's amazing. You know, I've traveled the Rhone from Lyon to Arles a couple of times, and how that changes from the northern to the southern Rhone so quickly is like almost opening a door to another room. Would you agree, Evan? It's really, all of a sudden it's so different, and it's warmer, and the place in the spring smells like herbe de Provence. It really does. So we are in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This is a domain called Font de Vente. Etienne Gonnet was the original owner. He founded this domain in 1950. His grandsons, Bertrand and Guillaume, now have taken over. They are the 3rd generation. And they expanded what was originally 30 hectares to now about 50. And so they make, you know, Côte-du-Rhône Village, Châteauneuf-du-Pape Blanc and Rouge, and plus Reserve Cuvée. And then they also own a parcel in Gigondas. So they make some Gigondas as well. So the grapes they're certified organic vineyards. They are moving into biodynamics. We've got a native yeast ferment. We've got obviously co-fermentation going. You know, this wine I think it's 50% Grenache. Let me bring up the score sheet for you. So it says, what does it say? 50% Grenache. There we go. 50% Grenache, sorry. 10% Mourvedre, 10% Syrah, 5% Cinsault, 5% Counoise, and 5% Bourbon.
It's a great example of CDP, don't you think, Tim? I just put that in the chat room.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, Maddie, this is a testable wine.
I said worth memorizing, right?
Yeah, and frankly, the sherry is too, by the way. So, yeah, but anyway, this is a great example of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I'm a fan of these wines. I think these are quintessential winter wines. If I was going to make, you know, pot roast or a stew or a braise or something like this, this would be one of the first wines I'd think about pairing with it. So, yeah.
Tim, I need to go back to the polls because most people picked Zinfandel. How is it?
Okay, so everybody, all right, so everybody take a sip of the wine and swallow it. And notice how earthy the wine is. It's earthy and minerally. There are times when I do come across Zinfandels, especially from old vineyards, that can have mineral to them, but not like this. And also notice the tannin structure and how grainy and gritty it is on the finish. And, you know, it's just, I would just say it's just so profoundly earthy. And also the lavender and Mediterranean-like thing, it's almost like tapenade, is definitely not Zinfandel. But you know what? That is a great core of an exercise where you get a Zinfandel next to this wine, and you can really see the difference pretty quickly. And also Zinfandel is going to be fruitier, to be honest. Yeah.
Tim, the other question here is from Dipanka. I love this question. It's about the deeper, usually Grenache is usually pale ruby is what she says, or he says. Deeper color is all Syrah and Mourvedre, and also thinking about an Amarone de Valpolicella.
Okay, so yeah, those are good points to make. I'm going to answer them one in a row. So, unless it's really inexpensive Côte de Rhône, Grenache is going to be a more deeper ruby red type color. There's going to be some color to it. It's going to be red versus, say, purple or some combination thereof. And so, yes, to your point, the color is coming from Syrah and Mourvedre. Absolutely. That's where the color, and frankly, that's where the tannin is coming from too. Also initially thinking Amarone Valpolicella. Well, the only thing I can say is that Amarone is not peppery and also doesn't have the lavender and all the Mediterranean qualities, much less the savory soy qualities. And Amarone, to me, more often than not, has volatile acidity, also has higher alcohol than this, and raisinated fruit more than anything, because it is, after all, made from dried grapes. That's a great set of questions.
Yeah, and an impression of, if not actual residual sugar in there as well too.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I was happy to be able to put this. This is the first Chateauneuf du Pape we've ever put in. We've done a lot of Rhone wines before, as Li Meng, who always sort of like runs herd on. They're usually too expensive, and this was just something we were very fortunate to fall upon, and a Chateauneuf du Pape at the right price and a Master of the World kit. That was Christmas to me. So we or Hanukkah, whatever. We wanted to make
have
it happen.
One last question on why isn't it a Australian Grenache blend?
Because it's too earthy. And also Grenache blend is going to be fruitier. And I love Australian GSMs. They're one of my favorite comfort food wines. But this is so earthy and savory compared to those wines. Yeah.
Dusty, really dusty.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tend to be a little bit more fruit bombish by nature, although they obviously do have their varietal characters.
There are no women winemakers today. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but we know the fact that women are behind the
But
scenes.
you've got two
actually
of us,
running
Maddie.
right? And actually, Stacy, $60 is unfortunately very reasonable for Chateauneuf, because in the last 5 years, the prices have doubled, sadly.
Yeah, easily. Okay.
All right. Well, let's move on to wine 5 now. Thank you for that lovely tour through the Rhone Valley, particularly the Southern Rhone Valley. And yeah, I concur with you, Tim. And having spent a lot of time there, and literally there just fall. We talk about here in the great state of California. And by the way, my heart goes out to all of my dear friends, any of you who may be in the LA area right now, and any of our brethren and sisterin who are down there. We've been through wildfires ourselves up here in North. There's never been a fire that's been either A, as costly, and B, as just devastating in some nature as this has been. It's just been horrific. So
thank you for bringing it up, Evan. No, I mean, it's humanitarian tragedy.
Absolutely. Good juju to everybody. But anyway, I was just going to say how we're so different in Northern California than they are in Southern California. Personality, terroir, terrain, etc. So too is the Northern Rhone versus the Southern Rhone. I mean, in many respects, they share a few grapes in common, but that's about it. Their topography is different. The styles of wine they make are different, etc. But this is Chateauneuf is such a quintessentially Southern Rhone style wine, and really emblematic. If you were to pick one wine from the area that's like, which is the wine I should know that defines your terroir, it's Chateauneuf. So there we go. All right, let's move on to wine 5. Let's take a look at this wine first. And this wine, well, I was going to say, I finished all my Chateauneuf, but I'm going to pour a little bit right next door to it so I can look at the two of them side by side. I always think it's good if you can reference point wines against the other. So, and whoever said that earlier about Grenache not having the intensity level that other grapes do is absolutely right. And in fact, when Grenache gets older, it drops color and goes brown very quickly, not unlike Nebbiolo can or Sangiovese can as well too. So this wine definitely has a deeper color. I would call the color here one of sort of a medium to medium plus ruby. That's pretty consistent, the outside edge. As I swirl it around, I'd say it's got pushing moderate plus levels of tearing in my clean glass. Let's go ahead and spend most of our time where the fun is, which is in the nose and in the mouth. And what I'm getting here is a really complicated series of things. So first of all, there is fruit here. But what I want to tell you about the fruit here, and this is true about the red fruit, it's true about the black fruit that's in here, There's arguably a kiss of blue fruit in there, maybe a little hint of a blueberry or boysenberry, but it's really a red and black fruit thing, probably more red, honestly, than black. Is you're getting three kinds of fruit at the same time. Tim talks all the time about condition of fruit. And you've got fruit here that's barely ripe. You've got fruit that's ripe. You've got fruit that's a little overripe. And you've got fruit that's a little bit raisinated all at the same time. I want you to hold on to that because I think later on when we get closer to, as you consult your lawyer, I would advise you, as we get to discovery period, right, in our law analogy here, I think that's going to be something that's important. The fruit here that's red is crunchy. I've got pomegranates. I've got strawberries that verge from very fresh strawberries to literally a jam character strawberries. I get cherry. I get a little bit of plum. In the black fruit, I'm getting black cherries. I'm getting a little bit of black plum, a little bit of blackberry too. There's a lot of fruit going on here. And I'm also getting everything that ranges from just the crunchiest and freshest of fruit to fruit leather, like the kind you throw in your kids' lunch boxes on the way to school. So a little bit of everything in between. What else am I getting? I'm getting a little bit of citrus, kind of in the realm of candied tangerine peel or candied orange peel. I'm getting a little bit of floral, again, a kiss of lavender, a little bit of maybe hibiscus or something like that. And then I've got tea leaf. I've got herbs. I've got mushrooms. I've got licorice. I've got everything. I've got laurel. I've got bay leaf. I've got a lot going on. And once again, fresh and dried in between everything. It's really just a hodgepodge, kind of a, dare I call it, a mutt of a wine in the most pleasant of ways that what's going on here. In the mouth, consistent with that richer viscosity that I saw with the tears forming. Got a bit of warmth in my chest, not horrific, not as warm as Tim's Chateauneuf was. I've got medium plus acid, but a good amount of acid on it as well too. But what's interesting to me is I was expecting something a little bit more jarring. I was expecting something a little bit grippier by nature, and I'm finding this wine to have a smoothness to it. A roundness, there's definitely tannin there, but the tannins are I would call them sort of medium to even pushing soft, if I could say that. A nice long finish, and a tasty glass of wine. So where could we be? Well, let's go back to where we were before. Tim gave us some interesting thoughts on Zinfandel. Hold on to those. Tempranillo blend. Tempranillo can be all shapes and sizes, whether you're in, gosh, Rioja, whether you're in Toro, whether you're in Ribera del Duero, the Penedès, etc., but all from the sort of Tempranillo family. And it could be a pure wine, or it could be a blend with all of the varying varieties that Rioja is married with, or the more international varieties you might find in Toro or Ribera del Duero. Could be a Malbec blend, pure or pure Malbec, etc. And our choices for areas are going to be Portugal. And if you're sitting your head scratching, you go, Tempranillo, Portugal. Remember, they have it. It's not the same name, but it's Aragonés, usually when you find it in Portugal. They don't have Malbec and they don't have Zin. Actually, they do have a little bit of Zin in the Alentejo, right? I strike that. Spain, again, Tempranillo is going to drive that one. Argentina, probably Malbec or Malbec blend, although they do have Tempranillo as well, too, particularly in the areas in the center of the country. And then north of Mendoza, south of Salta, more like towards La Rioja and San Juan. And then other. So you could do all that. And in California, gosh, we do everything here in the great state of California. So think about that. Hold on to that. Pay attention to the architecture. Look at the color as you're thinking about how you want to vote, and think of the flavor profile. So with that said, let us hop into our plane. I wish I had a Learjet. I just get economy. Maybe I'll get on one of the services where you can like buy seats on somebody else's private plane. That way you get the private plane experience without having to do the money. And our choices are, I guess, Limang, has everybody voted at this point in time? Should we hop into our?
Yep. Let's share the results.
Let's go. So this flight, unlike we've been doing a lot of puddle hoppers before, dare I say, team, on this flight, we're going to have to jump onto a plane and go just a little bit more distance. So let that, as you know what you voted for, think about where that's going to be. Because I'm going to tell you, we're not getting on Ryanair. We're not getting on Iberian version thereof. We're going to hop on a longer flight. So we're actually going to stay. I'm going to help you here. We're going to stay in the same hemisphere. So that rules out something, but we're going to take a long flight. So we're leaving all of our good friends down in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. We say goodbye to the Pont d'Avignon. We'll say goodbye to the Palais du Pape in that same area. And we're going to hop on and we're going to take a really hard turn right. And we're going to head west. Go west, young man, go west, young women. And we are going to bring ourselves back to the great state of California. We're going to find ourselves in the north of California, and we're going to find ourselves in one of the more northern parts of premium wine production in the state of California, and that is indeed in Mendocino County. So this is a specific area, and a specifically very small area called Eagle Peak. Eagle Peak is one of the smallest of the AVAs, or the nested AVAs, within the county itself. There's some 26,000 acres there, and only 115 acres planted in the Eagle Peak AVA. The Eagle Peak AVA is where one is going to find this particular vineyard, which is called the Heart Arrow Vineyard, which we'll find when we get there in a minute, from Mike Dash. And this is a fun wine. It is a Zinfandel, guys. However, it's he calls it les enfants terribles, the horrible children, the terrible children, Zinfandel. And he's got a whole line of wines that he makes in this, and it's a kind of a different style. So part of the terribleness is that he treats it extremely naturally. So these wines are unfined, unfiltered, native ferment. By the way, if you noticed, native ferment is my theme so far all the way through. And Madeline, I'm going to prove you wrong here, in that one of the two winemakers here, it's a couple that make the wines, is a woman, and that would be Ann Dash, who, along with her husband Mike, make these wines here. Their winery is actually located in Alameda, which is in the East Bay of California. They used to be in downtown Oakland, but they are what you would call an urban winery. So they source fruit from all over different parts of the North Coast, a little bit in the South Coast as well too. But they basically make heartier styles of wine, and they make them from different areas. So they have been making wines together since 1996. Their love and heart are in Rhone varieties and Zinfandel. Mike is relatively local. In fact, they live in San Francisco, about a 10-minute drive from my house. We get together from time to time. His experience was at Ridge. He is a Zinfandel fanatic. It's full of Zinformation. If you need information about Zinfandel, ask Mike. Anne is from Brittany, and while she spent some time up at Chapelet, she's got a lot of time working in distillation as well too. She was over at RMS Cellars before they did that. They met, they fell in love, they got married, they produced their first vintage as a couple back in 1996, which was a Dry Creek Valley Zinfandel. Very old school, 900-gallon old oak, so it's probably why you're not picking up any old oak on it. However, the cool thing about this, hence the other side of the terrible children, is that this wine is made untraditionally. So this wine is Zinfandel made semi-carbonically, which is to say all of it is whole berries layered on top of itself. So it starts to crush itself. And then into that, they pitchfork in about 10% whole clusters and some added stems. Not too much on the added stems there. So what you're getting is you're getting a more sort of almost opulent, dare I say, Gamay-like gentleness about the fruit and gentleness about the tannin, but with a profile that is clearly a Zinfandel vineyard. So this is primarily Zinfandel, but it's what they would call mixed blacks. So you've got, Tim was talking about like Alicante Bouschet or Garnacha or Peloursin, all these other grapes being mixed into the blend, which makes it a more unique and intriguing flavor profile. So even though it's labeled as Zinfandel, you get a blend anyway. That's how a lot of the old Zinfandel vineyards are planted. And this is just a really special spot. The vineyard itself goes back probably about 30 or 40 years. So just cusping on that old vine definition today. And they do just an absolutely lovely job.
You know, talking about the diff between this and Tempranillo, you may have addressed this, and if you did, forgive me for not catching it. But I mean, really go to the presence of oak and both the combination of bottle age and barrel age, if you're talking Rioja specifically. And that's, you know, that's a thumbprint. It's, you know, one look at the label's worth $1,000. So I'm not saying you can't confuse them. I also think there's a simplicity to Zinfandel. That's not a negative thing. It's not a character flaw, but it tends not to be quite as layered. Is that a fair statement?
I would say it tends to have, in this case, there's an opulence about it, probably as much due to the choice of winemaking, but there's simply a very primal, fruit-driven simplicity about the variety, which is why, you know, it is so good with rustic food. It's good with pizza. It's good with hamburgers. It's good with just about everything. It's just an easy drinking wine. It's quaffable. I wouldn't call that, you know, there's a French term called gouléant, which means just sort of quaffable, crushable, drinkable. It's not something I would always call with Zinfandel, but this is really a good example of a wine made in that style. And Zinfandel to me comes in like, as a red wine, by the way, not as a white wine, comes in sort of the Novello, easier drinking style, which this is, in this case, more semi-carbonic. It comes in more of an elegant style, made like a Bordeaux, if you will. And then it comes to in a monster truck style, which is sort of like pedal to the metal, big extraction, etc. That's one of the reasons I think Zinfandel is a problem in the market in terms of just getting traction. Is somebody who buys a bottle, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get, but you're always going to get a wine that tastes good.
Yay, Dash.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I'm glad that we were very expressive about this, because I'm usually wine number 6, and I frankly don't know what the hell to do with more than 10 minutes. I feel more comfortable with 5 to 8, but here we go. Questions to consider: alcohol level. Consider if that speaks to a moderate, warm or cool growing region. It can be a reflection of the vintage as well. Most important, non-fruit aromas and flavors again. And I think in this particular wine, pay very close attention to spice and a specific expression of spice. Limang is reminding us white surface on an angle, and describe the quality of the tannins: beyond, medium, medium plus, and high. Are they astringent? Are they fine grained, etc.? What's really neat, I'm putting my finger underneath this and I can't see it very easily. I wouldn't call this opaque, but verging on opaque. It is a very deep ruby. It lightens to same hue, just lighter at the very rim. There is a slight staining if I turn the wine in the glass. And I have to say that something I learned this year from my friend Tim Gaiser is that you don't have to swirl like a dervish. You can just turn the wine in the glass and guess what? It's evaporating off the sides, so I'm trying to wean myself from doing this constantly. Sometimes beating the wine up it's not going to be happy about it. So you're not necessarily going to get more. Aromatically, this wine is shocking to me. First of all, it meets you, it jumps out of the glass. You could probably get within an inch of it and start catching it big time, but right in the glass, wow. And it's so beautiful. I'm sorry, I'm waxing poetic here for a second. I'm annoyed that I have to define it because it's very integrated, but okay, I will. What's the first blast is this perfectly ripe red fruit, followed by black fruit. But pick your cherry, red currant, etc. And then black cherry again, black currant, and plum. There is a very strong floral element just melted in there, like you mixed up dried flowers in the mash. And it's a combination of highly aromatic flowers like violets, lavender, maybe even a little jasmine. And it could be a combination of fresh and dried. And then right on the heels of that, we're moving into olives, black and green, a saltiness, fennel, anise, dried herbs, very garigi. And I'm not leading you to the Southern Rhone because we've done that. I'm just saying that beautifully aromatic dried herbs. And take your pick. I don't often say rosemary because it's such a dominant smell, but this one's got it. There is a combination. I think in terms of earth, it's in there, but it's more sort of dust as opposed to inorganic. But there's something else that the three of us have a dear friend called Michelle who calls it the Jimmy Dean smell. This combination of meatiness to it, what the French would call animal, blueberry waffles with pepper bacon. Oh, Tim, you are a poet. This is the author who gets up every morning and writes at least 500 words. Bravissimo.
Right.
Smoke, like campfire smoke, embers, smoked meat, says the vegan vegetarian, just glorious aroma with all the combination of meat, verging on leather, but it's not Brettanomyces, flowers, fresh and dried, perfectly ripe fruit. I'm going to go ahead and take it on the palate before I start to burble because I just love the smell. I'm in Detroit, but I'm not driving. I swallowed most of it. So what's surprising to me on the palate, because it's been about an hour since I tasted this initially, it's very lifted. And oh, by the way, I didn't talk about the legs, but they are, they're trudging. Not unlike the Fino, only red stained. So there is a significant amount of extract and I would dare say alcohol that I can perceive in my chest when I taste it, but it belongs. I don't do the numbers thing when it comes to alcohol. It's an issue of, is it integrated in the wine? So the first blast on my palate structurally is the acidity. It's actually medium plus. It's refreshing. The tannins are significant, again, medium plus, but I would say, drying, but pretty finely grained. The alcohol is medium plus plus, but it works in this wine. It's young, but it's, starting its journey to complexity. I'm going to take another quick greedy taste. Just hold it. Mid-palate, you get that blast of fruit that expands from red to black and blue as well. It is definitely not as expressive on the palate as it is on the nose. That speaks to youth to me. This is a wine that's starting to do this, and it's showing it in the nose. On the palate, you get dried flowers for sure. You get fresh, ripe, not overripe, but perfectly ripe, dominantly red, but also black and blue. Fruit, you get dried herbs for certain. Not as much, pushy herbal presence like in the case of rosemary, but more sort of garigi or tobacco leaf. Definitely a presence of olives and fennel/anise. The meatiness is more aromatic than it is on the palate. Oak presence, it's there, but it ain't new, or not much of it's new. It's really neat when you start to recognize quality oak, but not a blast of vanilla or what I call the Starbucks smell. The structure, going back to it, is this beautiful tension between acidity and tannin that presents itself in some grape varieties with regularity. I'm not saying this has anything to do with it, but Sangiovese does that to me. Mouth-watering acidity and lots of moderate tannins. It's very high quality, and interestingly, the finish is a little short. Again, to me, this is not a demerit. It's the mark of a young wine. It's just starting to expand. And I'll answer my own question. Alcohol level speaking to a warm, moderate, or cool growing region. Very interesting. There's alcohol, and it's probably 13.5, 14-ish, but the acidity is mouthwatering. So I would say possibly high altitude, possibly cooler growing region, maybe a riper year. It's not always clear cut. It's not switch on, switch off. Rock and roll on the Polymay.
All right, let's go.
Love this wine, Evan. Thank you. Whatever it is, it's just really well done. And my compliments on the selection on this particular set. They're always interesting, which speaks to your eclectic and inclusive mindset, but also ability to select quality. Yay.
Thank you.
Okay, what are we considering? Syrah blend, which could be, Grenache, Mourvedre, and its other compatriots, or other stuff. Malbec blend, often with other Bordelais varieties. I can't remember the last time I had a Malbec that was blended with something that wasn't Bordelais. And Sangiovese is rearing its little head here, that presented itself structurally to me on the palate. Still mouth-watering. Whoa, long texture. Where are we going? In Europe, Italy, or France? So France can embrace Syrah, Malbec. Italy is embracing Sangiovese. Australia and Argentina, for sure, Malbec for Argentina. Australia, Syrah, Malbec, never had one from there. Sangiovese, I've had Sangiovese and Nebbiolo from Australia. These guys plant every damn thing, and they just play with it until they decide to make it commercially. Ask yourself, is there enough earth for this to be from Europe? Ask yourself what leads in this wine. Is it fruit, or is it, terroir driven aspects? What do we have? The Academy has voted, half of them, 50% for Syrah. Are we getting a good turnout on the polls, Lee May?
Absolutely, 87%. So thank you
Yay,
everyone for jumping
team.
in. Yeah,
You're not falsely modest or too shy.
yeah.
Very interesting, almost neck and neck on Malbec versus Sangiovese. And then in terms of Europe, etc., we're pretty evenly split with a slight edge to you know, not European. Can we have the choices again? The choices are, they're up here. Are you not seeing them? The choices are
Oh, I'm sorry.
somebody's not
You
seeing it.
have the polls also. We've already closed the polls, but you can see the choices again.
So we're talking Syrah blend,
Syrah
right?
blend,
Malbec blend, or
Sangiovese
Sangiovese blend.
or
Yeah.
other-
Italy, France, Australia, Argentina. There you go.
Yeah.
And very high quality for me. You know, and again, this is personal opinion. When I'm talking about quality, it always has to do, or very rarely doesn't have to do with fruit. Though I would say that Pinot had to do with the quality of winemaking.
Yeah. But I love the results here. You guys can see it if you're seeing the poll results. It's 21% for Italy, 21% for France, 29% for Australia, and 29% for Argentina. I think that's pretty well split with, you know,
Which is really cool.
yeah, it's really cool. So do you
Mhm.
want to talk a little bit more or you want me to go?
No, go. Mhm.
Okay.
I'm getting claustrophobia in Evan's Lear chat. Okay, so here we are, and we are, in this particular case, we are taking a ride, correct? And we are indeed going to the Southern Hemisphere, but we ain't going to Argentina. We are going to Australia. We are not going to the Barossa, not Barossa, I was corrected many times, Valley. We are not in South Australia. We are in, drum roll, the Southeast. So we are in Victoria. We are in, is it pronounced Heathcote or Heathcote? Heathcote. So we are in sort of central Victoria in a region that's north of the Macedon ranges. And this has a reputation of being a cooler climate. Well, specifically Macedon ranges does. Heathcote is a little bit warmer and is higher altitude influence. And I am so thrilled I've been here. This is a wonderful producer that I've never experienced, but boy, reading about them, place of changing winds, because that is the definition of a native phrase into English. This is a producer who used to be an importer of top international wines, but heavily European. So he, you know, is extremely vocal in expressing his appreciation for the influence he's received from all of the people that he used to represent, including Graillot, including from the Rhone, including Lamardier from Champagne, including Ponceau from Burgundy, Lafon from Burgundy, and on and on. What is the grape variety? Drum roll. Next slide. It is indeed Syrah. And it's a gorgeous example of Syrah. This is another wine that I would say in terms of varietal recognition, don't even worry about from where, but that aromatic is Syrah. It can't be anything else. And I'm saying this to all the people that are sweating, getting through, you know, any level of tasting examination, that combination of pepper, call it black or white, it doesn't matter. Smoke, meat, you know, ripe fruit, dried herbs. It's just a gorgeous example of Syrah. Oh, and I'm glad Jimmy Dean has helped you, Jerry. I'll tell Michelle DeHaze you said that, because that was her inspiration. So this is a producer that actually has their estate in the Macedon ranges, and they're like an amphitheater. Go to their website, actually Skernip's website. Really beautiful. There it is. Look at that picture. It's an amphitheater, but that's where their Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is produced, an area that is definitely cooler, higher altitude, 500 meters. And then further north, like 150 miles, in Heathcote is where he deals with two growers that are producing Syrah for him. This very serious looking man is the guy that, you know, gives other people all the credit for his inspiration. In terms of winemaking, very, very interesting component here. It is partial, a whole bunch, depending on the cuvee, as much as 75%. And I think you get that with the push of fruit, but it doesn't, candy it at all. Hold on Tim's book, and I'll be the first one singing from the mountaintops.
Right,
It's worth reading about their wood treatment because they use something that I wasn't really deeply familiar with called Stockinger Coopers that are Austrian. Here's another little theme here, Austria, but using wood from Austria, specifically around Vienna, Germany, Hungary, Romania, and France. But they are considered by many to be the Stradivarius of Coopers, used by Antinori, Conterno, Rajat Par, no new oak. So they combine their aging in used different sizes of Stockinger oak and also cement bats. I love this wine, and I think I made that clear by the way they found their estate site thanks to a phone call from the winemaker from a legendary grower in the Macedon Ranges called Bindi. Great Pinot Noir and Chardonnay producer. So thank you for showing this wine, Evan.
Yeah.
Sorry if I waxed poetic, but boy,
We're all good. We're all good. I wanted to bring this up because we're up to the 90 minutes, and I know that some of you have places to get to. So very quickly, Tim's new book, I just started it. It's amazing. Some of you may have already finished it. It's an amazing book.